Welcome to episode 105. Today we have a professional who's into ESG. I will describe what ESG is, what the expansion is, but let me just give you a brief background. Creating policies is just one aspect of managing transformation. Implementing them is another major challenge. As the world confronts the implications of climate change, environmental, social, and governance issues have to be dealt with at a global scale. And this creates new career opportunities for young people who want to make the world a better place. Who better to talk of this than Jangoo Dalal, who has over 30 years of experience in the technology sector? He's the co founder and CEO of GovEVA, or uh, a digital platform that enables measurement and sustainable outcomes for corporates, boards, and investors through environmental, social, and governance best practices. He has successfully led, grown, and transformed several businesses across India, SAARC, and Asia Pacific, including Cisco Systems, Avaya, D-Link, and Wipro. We will be speaking of what ESG practices involve and how they're being adopted and tracked. My name is Venugopal. I head a company called Ideascape, which is into branding, creative, and design. Every week, we talk to people with fascinating career journeys, and I get to learn a lot from every conversation. So let me welcome Jangoo to the show. Hi,
Hi,
Jangoo.
Venu. A very good morning. But I guess when people see it, it will be at different times of the day. So, good morning to you, and good day, good evening, etc. to whenever people watch this episode. Delighted to be on this episode 105 and share my insights on ESG sustainability with you over the next hour or so.
Wonderful. Can you tell us? It's a very unusual name, Jangoo. So, so can you brief us?
This is a curveball to start with. It reminds me of the currently going on India Australia Test series and Mitchell Stark coming in, bowling the first over and swinging the ball left and right. This is one question I didn't expect. But let me tell you, so I'm a Parsi Zoroastrian, people who may know that. And Jangoo has its names in erstwhile Persia. And essentially, there's confusion around this, like in many aspects of my life. My dad says Jangu comes from the Jang kind of thing, Persian word, which means fighter, whereas my mom thinks it comes from the larger word Jahangir, which means someone who does justice. So probably I think it means fighting for justice kind of thing.
Okay, that works. Okay, so what was your childhood aspiration and what were the kind of things that you dabbled in early on?
Childhood was good fun, Venu, to be sure. I grew up in a joint family. A lot of time was spent in a smaller town. I was born, brought up in Mumbai, but my grandparents from my mother's side were from a city called Surat, which is now bustling diamond capital and all. But many decades ago, it was a small, sleepy town. And so was a hill station outside of Mumbai called Lonavala, which again is a hill station, but used to be a
Right.
nice place. So I alternated my time between both the grandparents and grew up in an environment where roaming around, doing nothing was encouraged, or a lot of opportunities to do that. And I think that has kind of cultivated an attitude or personality in me which likes to kind of always explore things, be curious about things, kind of thing. So yeah, childhood was happy, fun, doing nothing, but at the same time observing, learning. Humans don't ever do nothing, right? Unless you're
It,
meditating.
uh, to today's
So
generation, it's anathema, right? Doing nothing. How can you not do anything? You want to fill every single minute and second that exists with activity or with excitement. Whereas the whole point of thinking up something happens only when you're drifting, which I think people will understand only when they go through it. So, school happened, uh, what were the kind of things that you considered, or were you instructed, guided to go in a certain uh, career, or how did you work that out?
I think people ask me, which was the best phase of your life. And I always tell them it was my school life because I don't know, today's generation is different, but in our times, you just went and studied because someone told you to study and you had lots of time to play. And someone was thinking for you and taking care of stuff for you, right? You were
Right.
guided, you were driven. I was fortunate to be in a school called the St. Xavier's High School in Mumbai, run by very good Jesuit academicians from all over the world we had at that point in time. So it was good fun, lots of balance between studies, games, and again, discovery. So I think childhood, whether it's with grandparents, schooling, all of it was good fun, discovering, drift along, and figure out
Yeah.
stuff.
And you got into networking, which became one of the hottest things because the internet kind of expanded. So, was that in some way planned, or is it again, like you said, it just happened because I happened to be at the right place at the right time?
Actually, there's a little bit of a backstory. So, you know, uh, let me tell you how I got into my professional life. Professional working life. Although I started earning at the age of 13 or 14, and I'll tell a lot of people, anytime you get an opportunity to start early, do it. It gives you a lot of
Yeah,
fun, freedom, and discipline. So I'm very
right.
proud of the opportunities I got at the young age of 13, 14 to do part-time jobs. Having said that, education-wise, after St. Xavier's School, I moved to the famous St. Xavier's College in Mumbai, and I did my bachelor's in mathematics. And I was extremely enamored by maths. And maths is, very often people in India, especially when you think maths, you think arithmetic and you get a little bogged down. But
Right.
maths is much, much more than arithmetic. And my crazy wish at that point in time was to continue in maths, do my master's, and so on and so forth. But then I had a very good professor who one day sat me down and said, I think you can do much more than academics. So stop all this and go do an MBA after your graduation. So that's what I did, Venu. And I finished my MBA from Mumbai University. I had a couple of job options. One was in a very famous advertising agency, one was in a storied multinational bank, Citibank, and third was in a fledgling tech company called IDM. To my family's horror, I chose to go to the tech company and not Citibank or the ad agency. You may also not like that. So I went into tech because I thought, yeah, ये मजा होगा थोड़ा, and it seemed to be the future. So I did that for a while, joined Wipro from that company called IDM, did sales, did channel management, got an opportunity to work in a joint venture Wipro did with BT, British Telecom. I had a British boss, which for a brief period of 2 years, who taught me a lot of stuff. And then, since Wipro BT was in networking, and around that time, Cisco Systems, which then became a very big name in networking and still is, entered India. I got an opportunity there. I was in that kind of area, started loving it, and moved there, and saw the whole journey of internet happening in India. So, very fortunate. So, partly good luck being there right time, but partly also, you know, constantly, even in my first 6, 7 years at Wipro, I would constantly seek change after every 1.5, 2 years. And I think one of the things I tend to tell people is you can seek change in the same organization. Change doesn't mean always changing an
Having to
organization.
leave.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah,
Great.
that's how I came into networking.
Okay. You're listening to the My First Job podcast. I'm talking to Jangoo Dalal, who has set up his own company in ESG, but that's a, uh conversation that we'll get to because I think what he's doing is extremely interesting, and there is a huge amount of opportunity in what people can learn from as far as networking goes. So, Django, what was early networking like? What were the kind of things that the early challenges, because I remember you had the 33 kbps modem which connected to a a phone line, and then you had no clue as to what happened beyond that. But obviously there was work afoot to try and figure out, okay, what are the challenges. So if you could tell me, what are the kind of ways in which networking itself grew, because you had a ringside seat and being part of the action.
No, it's when you look back, networking is something like computing. If you look back at computing itself, even 15 years back, the kind of power we had in the best and most expensive of computers, costing crores, not lakhs, is much less than what your smartphone has today. And same
Okay.
has been the I would say the trajectory of networking, but at a much faster pace. Networking incidentally started as a project out of Stanford University. Very interesting story kind of thing. So there were two professors who were dating in two separate departments of Stanford, and they eventually got married as well. And they obviously in Stanford had their own set of computers, and within which they had a lot of data. And they thought, wouldn't it be nice if they could exchange data across these departments? And that's when early discussions about protocols and creating products happened. And then it soon got commercialized by early venture capitalism, actually. So networking and venture capitalism have grown hand in hand, little known secret kind of thing. But to your point, yes, it started very slowly, especially in India, because till the longest of time, till as late as 1995, 94, 95, India had a monopoly on all kinds of telecom services with the Department of Telecom. People, I'm sure you knew this, right? In the 1980s or 70s also, you had to apply for a telephone line for home and wait for like 5 years, 6 years, even 10 years to get a phone, right?
Yeah.
And but today you have people hounding you to take your second, third, fourth, fifth SIM. So it's come a long
Yeah.
way. Uh, I think networking in India grew exponentially once the whole telecom scene got opened up and privatization came. And we are also recording this in the period, in a period of a few days before, after losing our dear Prime Minister Dr. Manmohan Singh, who among people don't realize that unleashing of the economy and the liberalization liberalized many sectors. And whilst everybody talks about how he impacted the economy and our growth rates and other things, even things like telecom and others, because the mindset changed, private sector entered, and you see the results of what's going on. So a lot of young kids may not know Dr. Manmohan Singh and his legacy and history, but guys, if you are enjoying your smartphones, your internets, your instas, and all of that, that gentleman, Dr. Manmohan Singh, is also some way responsible for making it happen for us Indians over here.
Absolutely. And having lived through it, we knew the before and after, which a whole lot of people today don't make out. But can you give me a non technical explanation of the kind of problems that networking was solving? One is scale, because the number of devices and various operating systems and protocols that had to be integrated and moved. Can you tell me what you thought were the watershed kind of events for networking?
See, if you see networking, it's kind of the skeleton of or the spinal cord of all that's happening around us today. Today, you take not going to a bank branch at all for granted. You take banking from your mobile for granted. Now, how's that? How is all that happening? All that is happening because data is moving instantly. And how does that data move instantaneously? It's all because of networking. So the initial periods when networking was happening, for example, there was a lot of resistance. People had their data, they didn't want to part with it. I remember when we were at Wipro, the PSU banks in India were pushed to go for computerization and what was called as anywhere, anytime banking. And we
Right.
had actually trade unions opposing that. We had trade unions who would, come out with placards against computers and networking devices and so on. So
Right.
I would say more than the technological challenges, because once there is opportunity and momentum, technology always steps up because money comes in and things happen. It was also a mindset issue. People are worried about, oh, my information, my data, what happens to me. There was worry about jobs as well. And and rightly so, because the jobs that we have today are very, very different from when networking became ubiquitous, right?
Okay.
Earlier, if you remember, 30 years back, there would be a guy, a clerk in a branch, whose only job was to sit and write entries in a passbook. That job's
Yeah.
gone, right? So many such
Completely.
jobs have gone away. And
Yeah.
so I would say the challenge was around people, mindset changes, and I keep thinking about a slogan, which a slogan or a brand or a tagline. You are an image networking brand guy. uh, Cisco used to have this original line when networking started, and they were like the leaders in that, which said that changing the way the world works, lives, and plays. And with a bit of a mathematics and analytical background, I was saying that's like too bombastic a statement to make. But now I realize it's absolutely happened, and that's
Yeah.
where we are today.
So I just like to understand this better because I'm talking as a complete layman. How is it that you can stuff more data into the same pipes? What exactly is happening? Is it mathematics? Is it uh, technology? I'm just trying to understand if you previously had a line where the transmission of data was, in bytes, and then you go up to 300 Mbps and 400 and one whatever, 100 Mbps. What exactly is happening?
So fundamentally, all the massive test matches you're seeing, or the spectacular movies you're seeing on Netflix, etc., etc., if you break them down to the smallest bit which is moving, it is a series of zeros and ones.
Okay.
The conversation you and I are having, I am seeing most of your hair, much more than mine, and
Okay.
every nuance on your face.
Yeah.
Actually, when it traverses, and when I'm looking at you almost instantaneously, it's finally moving as zeros and ones, right? And it's the speed at which you can move that combination around. So originally it used to move around in copper wires and conductors, which obviously have their own resistances and so on. Then we moved on to optic fiber, which is nothing but glass, and glass actually comes from sand. It's as simple as that: zero one sand, which becomes glass, it becomes fiber. So this is all innovation. This is all engineering, and this is at the base of it all. It's all maths. So to answer your question, how do you move more and more stuff from similar pipes, similar technologies? What appears to be to you and I to be similar actually fundamentally has changed. We moved from copper to fiber to multi-core fiber. Processors and routers, switches have become much more faster, much more efficient. You can pack a lot more into a piece of silicon than you did even 1 year back, for example. So combination of tech, innovation, but finally, if you look at it from a 30,000-foot level, all innovation, all tech, all investments only can happen if there is demand for it.
Right.
Because if there is demand for it, money will follow, because then they can monetize the investments which make. So the demand is exponentially growing. When networking started, no one thought that TV was at its peak, and no one thought that TV as we know will die, because today it's all streaming, right?
Yeah.
And whether you and I are talking or the India Australia test match, it's all streamed and it's all networking.
Absolutely. And one of the things that really I don't think it gets a bad rep, torrents, because of what it did. P2P I thought was amazing technology because what it actually managed was like organizing the extremely complex traffic in a city and then figuring out exactly which destination it should go to, which I thought was marvelous. And unfortunately, it was always associated with piracy. And people thought that the reason torrents are so popular is because movies are being downloaded and stuff like that. But I think that created a whole new set of innovations, which I think we continue to enjoy today. Because how do you compress? How do you manage to stream it across so many? Is all part of the technology that we today see, whether it's Netflix or the. Uh, I think recently NBA just said that they managed to pull off one huge NFL stream which had millions of viewers, 30 million viewers. So obviously this technology is getting better and better. So the speed at, like you said, it's ultimately moving of data. Where do you think this is going? Because data centers are exploding. So is storage becoming as big a problem as streaming? Because we are accumulating data like crazy, right?
So yes,
So
uh, these are multi-billion-dollar problems to process it fast and move it fast. There's this whole concept of CPUs, which we knew is gone. It's now GPUs, and companies like Nvidia are the most admired, most precious, most I would say valuable companies on the planet because they take care of that. And then the other industry which is booming is data centers, right? Because not only for the entertainment and information consuming, but the new, I would say, trend and future of our planet around AI is also intensely data and data processing and data storage intensive. And so, yeah, these are challenges. But again, it's all economics, capitalism, demand, money pours in, people find solutions. So, as long as you are creating or doing something which people want, solutions will come, is my view in
okay,
life.
okay.
And that, I
So
mean, a gun, but I'll just take a 1 minute
yeah,
segment,
please,
jumping the gun, but we'll, with your permission.
please.
As long as there's demand, solutions will come and money will come, also holds for careers, which is the topic of what you're discussing. If you choose a career which has got demand today, tomorrow, and more in the future, you're always going to be at the top of your game. But that was a tangent. Let's come back
No, no, I
and
think that's a truer statement was never said. A lot of people look at what is being paid today, but if you manage to figure out what is the potential for this job in future and where is it going, and I guess that's one of the handicaps that young people today are having. They have no clue as to what is the overall demand that is being driven by this particular sector that I'm in. And I don't know if there's an easy answer to that because at that point they're only saying, "Can I get a job?" So let's come down from 30,000 feet to your own career, which is what happened after Cisco. When did you move over to, next position that you moved into?
So after Cisco, which was around 11 years, including 3 years in Singapore running Asia Pacific, I came back to India for personal reasons. My dad was not keeping well and so on. And then I realized abhi kuch alag karna hai. I want to do something different, but in
Right.
a area which I am good at. So I went and joined a locally listed Indian company called D-Link. It was a joint venture with a Taiwanese company. It had its own manufacturing facilities. That manufacturing, incidentally, was in Goa, and everyone was
They were
telling
one
me,
of the earliest to come out with modems, right? Or
yes,
routers.
home networking products.
Okay. Okay.
So a lot of people said you're leaving Cisco, joining D-Link. It's like 100. Are you sure it's not because the factory is in Goa or something? So I said, yeah, maybe it's that, but I do want to have a feel of running a listed company. So I did that for a few years, Venu. Then I also ran a company called Avaya. And post that, I started my entrepreneurial journey, where I had a soft landing in terms of doing some consulting. Then I did a couple of startups. One was in the secured lending space. It was a company called
Okay.
Take Loans. Did something in psychometrics, which is at the intersection of psychology and statistics. Both
Right.
of these venture, one of them was an early sellout, buyout, exit kind of thing, the take best loans thing. The psychometric thing continues, and then started this whole sustainability ESG journey with my original co-founders who continue to be there even today. About 5 years back in the area of ESG and sustainability.
I'd like to get a little into what Avaya does because I want people to see a difference between, let's say, Cisco D-Link, and Avaya. How did those three flavors plan out?
So Cisco was this massive, it grew to be massive over the period which I was there. So it was a good period for me as well. Massive owner of the plumbing of the internet. Nothing moves today without passing through a Cisco box somewhere, right?
Right.
So that was at the core, the backbones kind of stuff. D-Link were the guys who made it happen in your homes, in your offices. So even if you got the data to your office, you still need to move it to hundreds of people or tens of people, whatever the size of your office. And Avaya actually was a very interesting company, a very old company which metamorphosized over a period of time. So Avaya started its life as AT&T, and it was Alexander Graham Bell who made the phone and monetized his invention to start a telephone company, which was called Bell and Company, which became AT&T,
Right.
and then various arms of AT&T were then split, and Avaya happened to be one of those arms. So Avaya was into enterprise voice, enterprise call centers, contact centers, data centers, things like those. So they specialized in very, very high quality and secure voice services. So, a lot of armed forces and, militaries, navies across the world would use their gear because you can't run an army or whatever without communicating. But that has to
Right.
be extremely secure, extremely stable, and reliable. You can't have your signal dropping when someone's intruding your airspace and stuff like that. So that's the kind of stuff Avaya did. And at a commercial level, they had products which enabled customer care, contact centers, and things like those.
Okay, great. So we'll get to GovEVA in the next stage of the questions. I'd just like to spend a minute on understanding what the transition is about. Okay, so you're listening to My First Job, the podcast that covers interesting career journeys. I'm talking to an extremely experienced and versatile Jangoo Dalal, who's been into networking, and then decided to move into ESG, which is what the focus will be in the next half of the podcast. So hang on and let people. So before we get to GovEVA, I'd like you to expand on ESG, which is environmental sustainability and governance. And apparently, this was the outcome of a conference that happened in 2004. I was told that it's only there that this whole thing was kind of initialized. So, if you could give a background as to why something like this is necessary and how do you see this growing and expanding in the years ahead?
Sure. So ESG stands for environment, social, and governance, and it is a pure corporate kind of a play. It also touches all aspects of societies and communities, but it's more a enterprise corporate business kind of a thing. You're right. It started in 2004, where there was a formal UN conference, and everybody started worrying about what's happening to the world. And all of us who will be watching this podcast do know the impacts that extreme climate situation, which has been caused by us as human beings, is having on the planet. We are in a very, very precarious situation. It doesn't really hit us immediately every moment of the day, so we don't internalize it. But if you read a bit about it, from a climate challenge, environment challenge, especially countries like India, we have a very, very precarious situation because we still have a long way to grow to get all of our population to where we want them to be in terms of standards of living. And at the same time, we are very, in a very rapid manner, depleting a lot of the natural resources that we have in our subcontinental area. But you're right, it started with the UN conference, and they uh, propagated this, and over a period of time there were multiple global initiatives which have pushed this forward. And why did everyone in the world come together to do this? People realize that the path that we are going on in terms of as a human race, 7 billion odd people, 2004 maybe we would have been 5.5, 6 billion, whatever, is not quote unquote sustainable. in the sense that from an environment point of view, we are on a very, very slippery slope. There continue to be massive social inequalities. So models of economic growth, capitalism, socialism, all of that have given still mixed results because we've had so many technological advances, we have so many comforts in life, which all of us take for granted. But at the same time, around the world, we've still not solved things like hunger, poverty, and inequality. And then at the same time, the corporate world, with things like Enron and then the whole financial industry meltdown in the US, so a lot of things where corporates, when they were allowed an extreme free hand in terms of being completely capitalistic, if not governed and overseen properly, could go and destroy a lot of wealth. And that wealth belongs to individuals like you and me, right? People pretty young over here, so they may not know Enron, but Enron, in a period of a few short months, it all built up, but then in a very rapid, small period, destroyed some close to $500 billion, $500 billion of individual wealth. Nearer home, very recently, we had an institution, ILFS, which in infrastructure leasing and financial
Yeah.
services, an organization which a growing country like India desperately needs because they were built to fund infrastructure. Again, governance failure and massive erosion of wealth, resources, clock put back, etc., etc. So that's on the governance side, things are happening. Social side, still a lot of inequalities, still a lot of pressures. People get exploited, people coming up in arms. In Tamil Nadu, your home state, Venu, we
Yeah.
had a scene with the
Right.
large
Yeah.
copper smelter, right? Owned
Right.
by Vedanta, and a lot of social unrest because people were getting affected. The not just livelihoods, lives were getting affected, and eventually that very productive plant closed down. And on the environment, we have severe issues around climate change. Uh, you know, we are seeing all kinds of crazy records all over the world. 2024, as we come to the close, has had the largest number of hottest days ever in the history of recorded temperatures.
Crazy.
Now, why is that bad? It's bad because it affects a lot of things. It affects the farmers because your crop cycles go for a toss. Uh, you know what you've as a farmer, what you've learned over generations, that hey, rains will arrive now, I will sow now, reap now, sell now, and repeat that cycle has kind of got disrupted. So your livelihood is impacted. Uh, People who are in the construction industry, they get affected. Every summer, most cities like Chennai and Mumbai run out of water. And what will the municipal authorities, politicians do? They cut off taps to people like the construction industry and not to you and I. Obviously, they should do that. But that throws that business for a toss. It adds to the cost of doing that business, right? So, a lot of issues around that. And then we have massive problems in India and across the globe on waste and water as well. Uh, we are depleting our water resources extremely rapidly. Waste, mountains of waste everywhere. Uh, Waste is bad because it emits all kinds of things. It affects people's health. There are lots of studies which have shown that environmental degradation collectively in 2023 costed the planet, all countries put together, upwards of $6 trillion. Now, that's a lot of money, right? That's two times the economic size of India because we are not paying attention to those fields. So that's where the whole buzz is coming. And corporates are also being made responsible now because whether we like it or not, businesses, corporates do drive a lot of what happens around us. They have the power to create jobs, industries, influence government decisions, etc. So unless you hold them accountable for things other than financial metrics, the needle doesn't move. Yeah,
I'll
Venu.
just take one uh, sort of diversion on this. That is sustainable. Anything that is required at global scale, is it sustainable? Even if it's the most plentiful, because let's say hydrogen, which is the most plentiful, the capture, the delivery into various forms, all of those. So we have all these solutions which are sustainable at a small level. But the moment that expands and the demand for that increases, it's almost as if there is nothing on the world which is purely sustainable. So, is there a way of managing multiple lines of existing technologies? Or do you think that the world needs to move to something which is a combination? Or is there some other way of looking at this?
We have a slight disagreement in terms of scale and sustainability. And
Okay.
I will give you an example of solar.
Okay.
Solar power, when it started at the scale that it started, at the commercial scale, when it got out of labs and it became commercial, where you and I could use it in our homes or factories or whatever. In the scenario of India, till about even 7 8 years back, the per kilowatt per unit cost, right? We all pay per unit price for the electricity we get in our homes and offices. Used to be double digits, $11, $12.
Right.
Today, it's like 2.5 rupees. It's cheaper than any kind of conventional energy. So it's like, we have this phrase, commit the hour, commit the man. I think commit the hour, commit the technology also happens. uh,
Okay.
as I said, as long as there is sensible demand, innovation, and the human mind to create good innovation will always happen. Now,
Okay.
hydrogen you mentioned, right? Hydrogen is in abundance, but you have to extract it from water. The basic fundamental class 5 physics kind of thing. You have to electrolyze water and separate hydrogen and oxygen. But to do that, you have to consume energy, right? To electrolyze the water, and so that's where
Right.
some of the challenges are coming. And there's things like black hydrogen, brown, green. So
Green
you
hydrogen movement.
use coal energy to go and split the hydrogen oxygen and make hydrogen, or you're going to use renewable. So all of those challenges are there. But let me tell you, being in this field, I'm quite optimistic, not quite, very, very optimistic about the kind of technologies and investments which are happening. It's
Yeah.
just that we need a regulatory push and an individual mindset push to adopt these things.
So from networking to ESG was almost like switching, it's not just like switching streams, like going off at a tangent. So what drove you?
Uh, I would say, you know, uh, a lot of us very often do careers or jobs which we enjoy, like doing, etc. But they may not be the core of our being, right? If you're a product manager, say in a FMCG product, you're selling sugar bombs or whatever that you're selling to people, or a confectionery company or whatever, right? Or if you're selling toothpaste or whatever you're selling, you know what's going on there. You're doing the job because you enjoy it, you get joy out of it, but somewhere in your core you may or may not agree with that. I think with me, it's whilst networking and all is not at all harmful, like sugar bombs and stuff. Uh, I had a passion for the environment, nature. I told you how I grew up in smaller places, and I would say, one thing which really got me thinking, because we all in a daily grind, is when I moved to Singapore, and this is a very interesting story, Venu, which I would like to share with you. So when I went to Singapore, my son was just about a year and a half, 2 years old, I think. And we were in Bangalore and we moved to Singapore. Bangalore in the early 2000s had this pollen allergy, Congress glass problem, if you remember.
Right.
I mean, people used to
Very
get
true.
it had more. Bangalore population had more breathing problems than rest of India.
True.
Fortunately for us, neither me, my wife, or my kids had that problem, including my son, perfectly healthy. Moved to Singapore, and within 4 months, my son started having respiratory wheezing problems. Right.
Oh,
So I went to the pediatrician, and he said, "Yeah, he's got this. You'll have to put a nebulizer." He gave solution, but I said, "Why is this happening?" So he said, "It's the air, the environment." I said,
wow.
"Excuse me, I'm coming from India. I'm
Yeah.
coming from Bangalore, which is notorious for this, and now I'm in Singapore, and you're telling me it's an air environment problem." So he was a very wise, one of the renowned pediatrician. He said, "Where do you live?" I said, "I stay in so and so place." He said, "Do you have central AC?" I said, "Yes, I do." Is your kid going to a play school?" I said, "Yes, he's going." "Does it have central AC?" "Yes." "Does he go by a school bus?" "Yes." "AC?" "Yes."
Oh,
Weekends you travel by metro, AC, malls, AC, yes, yes, yes. So he said, think of it, even if 0.1% of the population has some problem, it spreads very rapidly to everybody. And that's when I started, thinking to myself that, hey, listen, here I am in a much more advanced country, much more advanced economy, technology, comfort, cleanliness is superb there. For an Indian, Singapore is like this epitome of
absolutely.
what to, right?
Right.
But and it is definitely a better place in many ways, but obviously we have our strengths as well. But it got me thinking that just because you're making progress in one area doesn't really mean you're solving problems or you're not adding to existing problems. And then I started reading a lot about some of these things, and I realized that, and one thing led to another. I started reading about environment, climate, and start reading about social and other things. And I realized something needs to be done. And whenever I get a chance, my next stint should be in this area. So it was kind of I would say, one of the instigators in my life to move in a different direction. And then, as I said, I was fortunate to have two like-minded co-founders when we started GovEVA who were thinking along those lines of environment, social governance. And we also saw that there is a rapidly evolving and large business to be had over there. So
Okay.
I would say we were concerned, passionate people with a capitalist bent of mind who said that, okay, here's something where we can make a business out of something we care for.
So give me a sense of what the job opportunities are today at an entry level in ESG, and how should young people today prepare for a career in ESG?
So, ESG sustainability is becoming a industry and a stream by itself, right? Uh, you could have a career as an academic, career path in sustainability, research, reading, doing stuff. You can go and join a corporation, any corporation in any field. In India and globally now, listed companies, larger companies are being put to task to take sustainability ESG seriously, and they are in-house teams. So you could go and work with corporates over there, or you could work with us, people like us who are ESG solution providers. So uh, corporates, academics, solution providers, more and more financial institutions, banking institutions now have ESG woven into whatever they do. Consulting firms have big ESG practices. So point I'm trying to make is sometimes when you hear ESG sustainability, the mind, maybe rightly so, goes towards just environment and thinking, oh, you need to be an environment engineer or something like that. No, not really. I would say is one of those sunshine fields that whatever your graduation is in, you may be an art student, you could be a commerce student, you could be a science student, you may be an accounting person, whatever. There are different jobs available. Even lawyers, there are large firms have today environmental just environment focused lawyer practices or consulting practices uh, around whole ESG metrics. Today, more and more banks and financial institutions have jobs where the job of those people is A, to report ESG metrics, make sure the company progresses on them, and then in hardcore finance to melt climate risks into their lending scenarios. So, I'm starting at a very high level.
Right.
In the sense, what I'm trying to tell is, firstly, don't think that ESG equals to environment and hardcore science and you need to be an environment engineer. No. As long as you have a passion for that area or you think you want to work in this area, jobs are available across various streams like in everything else. In
Oh,
academics, in corporates, in government organizations, in development institutions, tons and tons of dollars and effort is going over there, or in solution providers like us, where in my company I have people who are in tech, sales, they're hardcore consultants, deep knowledge of ESG kind of thing. So I would say careers are plenty. Irrespective, this is one of those areas. It's probably like sales, right? Uh, Irrespective of your grad, if you have a flair and passion for it, you can do it.
yeah. And these are the things that people need to understand, that an outside label alone is not enough unless they go deeply into whatever that field is opening up for. So typically, how do companies or corporates announce these? Do they say that this is in ESG, or do they say that we are looking for somebody with? I'm just trying to say, how should they identify and look for these opportunities, and how should they go about it?
So it's evolving. It's early days, and but it's rapidly evolving and rapidly growing. So I've been in this business for 5 years, and earlier as a solution provider for us, it was all push, push, push. Now it's more of a bit of pull is coming in. So corporates, for example, have roles right at the top called the CSO, the Chief Sustainability Officer, and he or she would then have his team. Some of them focused on reporting because reporting on ESG is becoming very, very onerous, demanding, and in turn drives a lot of change within the organization. So that department will have people focused on reporting, on the regulatory part, on actually going and changing some of the processes, practices, going and driving change and things like this. So that's on the corporate side. Uh, if you're in a tech field, if you've done your basic IT programming, computing course, and if you like tech, and you have a passion or you want to be in the sustainability ESG domain, there are enough solution providers who want people who want to read about this domain and then do their tech work, right? Uh, Similarly, if you're a lawyer, you could go and join firms which have departments now for this. So I would say it's across the board. Uh, I would urge people, this is one area where you don't need a pre-qual. You need to start self-learning, figuring, and go deeper. There are many
Okay.
opportunities.
Okay. So now coming to another part, which I think you mentioned, the push part. It was all push, push, push. So since companies have existing supply chains and they have, kind of optimized it to the point where they're getting the best bang for their buck, how do you get them to switch to something that is sustainable? Because it seriously affects their plans, right? Am I right about that? Or I don't know if that's the truth.
No, so supply chains play a very, very critical role, and unlike an internal change, a supply chain is slightly harder to do because you cultivate those, build those over a period of time. But it's a necessity, right? Let me give you an example, little old example. So I'm sure all of our listeners, viewers must have heard or read about this. One of our favorite chocolate brands, which we all grew up with, in
Yeah.
large parts of Europe was boycotted for a while. And they were boycotted because there was a research done and an article and a series of articles came out in the media which said that, hey, listen, you're having this chocolate, but the cocoa, which is the essential ingredient, when it is sourced from places like Africa, the people who are working in those areas are literally treated like slaves. So
Right.
here you are, you're biting into chocolate to feel good, and then you suddenly start thinking, oh, this started off with someone being subjugated to extreme slavery. So now that's a supply chain issue, right? The, the company making the chocolate probably takes cocoa from a supplier who has 2 3 layers of intermediaries in between, but they had to focus on that, otherwise the business would be in danger.
Right.
That's just one example. But we are seeing, we deal with a lot of corporates in various sectors at GovEVA. Everywhere, the urgency around supply chain is becoming very, very important. Because whether it's regulators, investors, your external stakeholders, even customers, are putting pressure on you to see what the hell you're doing with your supply chain. Uh, Younger generation people were thinking, and a lot of them are very smart people, today prefer clothes and fabrics and textiles which are sustainably sourced. And as a company, you have a regular brand versus a sustainably sourced brand. You are able to command a premium for the sustainability sourced brand. And if you're in that business, then you have to go down the value chain right up to where the cotton was made and what are the practices there and right up the chain.
Okay. So you have got into, you have a solution for tracking the parameters. So how did you build this product, and what is it that what are the challenges that you faced while doing it, and what are the challenges that you continue to face today?
So another, so unlike building any other tech product, when you're building something for ESG sustainability, you need to understand the domain and the space very well. So there are lots of metrics, parameters, things that we are dealing with, right? On our platform, for example, we calculate carbon, and carbon itself can be in various forms when it is generated. And carbon is a very essential part of ESG because that's causing a lot of the climate challenges that we have. And corporates and even small MSMEs are being held accountable for that. So you need to have a deep understanding of the domain. You need to get people who are willing to read, learn, continuously change and evolve because this domain itself is evolving. So the key challenge I think we had and we continue to have is there are no ready-made people in this domain. So we have to get people who have passion and then train them and make ensure they self-learn and self-evolve. And that's another thing I would say that whilst there is no pre-qual to get into ESG, there is one continuing qualification which you need to have, which is an ability to be curious and to continuously learn, do research, and see what's happening and imbibe all of that. And it's all at the end of it common sense that
Yes.
you have to put into practice.
Yeah. That is uncommon in most cases, because when you look at something like this, it's almost as if it seems like a problem which is not very easy to solve. So, the people who are coming on board, are they the people who are forced to do it, or in most cases, it's because I understand my social responsibility, which I think there are a few companies, but by and large, policy comes first, isn't it? And then it comes like, okay, there is a standard which you have to live up to. It's like once FASTag came in, and then you were able to put on this whole other thing of tracking. Unless the technology actually exists, it's become very hard. So, what are the challenges, especially when the companies at the bottom, which are, let's say, they're highly polluting not because they want to be, but because their business works in that way, and they're not digitally transformed companies? A whole lot of it is work which is done manually. So, how do they then integrate into a system that you provide, or do you provide connections to try and see how that can be managed?
So when you're right, there's always this. It's like when we were in school, right? Some kids were genuinely good, and some had to be beaten up to be good, kind of thing. So there are companies, who have evolved leaderships. It's part of their brand. It's part of what they are, like the Tata
Right,
Group and things like those, right? Tata
right,
Sons, we know what they stand for. They'll not do, mostly not do wrong stuff and things like that. But then there are others where a regulatory push and shove is required. And why does the regulator do it? Regulator is finally the government. Why does the government do it? Because government, whatever its inefficiencies, finally does work for the larger good of the people. And governments all over the world realize that unless something is done about climate change, social issues, governance issues at the enterprise corporate level, which seems to run a lot of what's happening around the world. Now with the new dispensation in US, Trump, Musk, you can see how a billionaire entrepreneur is driving, and that's going to happen more and more. The trust is on corporates, and the government, if it wants to move the needle, has to use a regulatory push to do that. So you're right, it's a combination of people doing it themselves and a regulatory push coming. That's one stakeholder, but there are other stakeholders which push ESG sustainability. I would say the most important is the customer. Today, the customer is demanding more and more out of their supplier. And by customers, we immediately think of a B2C consumer buyer. I also mean the B2B buyers. So
okay,
today, the IKEAs and many large companies, large corporates in India as well, who are into textile exports and all kinds of global supply chains, will demand of their suppliers to meet some basic norms, right? If you're running a large listed healthcare hospital company, uh, they do get very demanding on their suppliers. And once the supplier realizes that yes, there is an initial pain, but in a very quick period there is money and gain, people do fall into line waving. Because a lot of this, it's like the solar example I gave you, right? Today you don't have to push solar. It's like
Right.
conventional energy to your office is like 5, 6, even $10 at peak hours versus this is $2.5. So you're scrambling to get supply rather than being pushed to get it.
Yeah. No, it's an amazing sort of way to proceed because problems at this scale require solutions which manage to measure up to these things. And initially they are small to begin with, and then as it grows, it'll then get. So, is it ESG companies across the world? Do they have a common standard? Is there a way in which you can all be assessed at one level, or is that each company is developing its own methods and systems of evaluating this according to government norms? And then at some point, you get an understanding of what the global view is.
So yeah, like any evolving domain, there are multiple standards. So Europe, the unified EU has its own standard. US has some standards. A lot of the world has a standard called GRI. India has its own standard called the BRSR for listed companies, and then a whole bunch of other things. But what we're seeing over the last 2, 3 years is that there is a gradual unification happening. And I think there is a good optimistic view that in the, I would say, the next 3, 4, 5 years, we would see a slightly common way in which most companies and individuals' ESG practices would be measured. Like, if you look at accounting, financial accounting, right? Today we are in such a connected world, and companies have businesses all over the world. Even 10 years back, 20 years back, different jurisdictions, countries had differing accounting standards. Then the IFRS and others came and kind of unified it, because how do you measure a Google in India versus Azerbaijan or US or whatever, right? You need common metrics. IFRS, which is the accounting body which kind of drove a lot of that homogeneity, is also now got into ESG sustainability standards and reporting. So it's a little disparate at the moment, but it's converging. And that's another career opportunity for people, right?
Yes.
If you're into accounting, auditing, IFRS is now moving towards ESG auditing accounts.
Right.
Go after it.
Great. Django, I wish we could have spent more time, but we barely scratched the surface. But I think you've given people an idea of what they can expect and how much this needs to be driven by individual curiosity and qualification. Like, after spending so many years in networking, you found a completely new career option, which is going to define the next few years and probably decades of your life as well. Thank you for coming on the My First Job podcast. And it was a pleasure hosting you and getting to understand what the business of ESG involves. Okay.
Absolute pleasure to be part of your show, Venu. I hope a few people get some value out of it, and they can find me on LinkedIn. And if they have more queries about any aspirations or mentorship that they want as they go on this career, happy to help.
Wonderful. Thank you for making the offer, and I'm sure that message will get across to people. Thank you for coming us
Cheers.
on the show. That was Jangoo Dalal, who heads GovESG and has been making a tremendous effort in ensuring that these policies and practices get implemented at a large scale on companies. Next week, we'll be back with another interesting career journey, like we've been doing for the past 104 episodes. So continue to listen, join, subscribe. Thank you.